Imagine waking up at dawn, not because your smartphone alarm is blaring some unbearable pop song, but because the rooster outside your mud and straw hut is crowing like it's auditioning for a death metal band. That's your alarm clock in the medieval countryside, circa 1200 AD. Welcome to the life of a serf, the backbone of the feudal system, where your existence is a raw, unfiltered reality show with no commercial breaks and a very real chance of dying from something as trivial as a toothache. Could you handle it? Let's dive deep into the muck and grind of what it meant to be a serf in medieval Europe, peeling back every layer of dirt, hard labor, and those occasional, well, at least I'm not dead yet, moments of optimism to see if you could endure the daily hustle. Your day starts in the pre-dawn gloom, around 4 or 5 a.m., when the first rays of light creep over the horizon. The sun is your only clock, and the crops don't care if you need more sleep. You roll off your bed, a sack stuffed with straw, or, if you're really down on your luck, just a pile of rushes on the packed dirt floor. The straw itches, smells faintly of mold, and hosts a thriving ecosystem of fleas that treat your body like an all-you-can-eat buffet. You scratch instinctively, already used to the bites, and stumble toward the hearth in the center of your one-room home. This isn't a cozy Pinterest cabin. It's a hut, maybe 5 by 6 meters if you're lucky, with wattle and daub walls, woven branches slathered with a mix of mud, straw, and whatever was handy. The roof is thatch, a thick layer of straw or reeds that sounds rustic until it leaks during a storm or catches fire because someone knocked over a candle. There's no chimney, just a hole in the roof, so the smoke from the fire lingers like an unwelcome guest, stinging your eyes and coating your lungs with a gritty film. You share this cramped space with your wife, kids, maybe your parents if they're still alive, and a collection of animals. Chickens, a pig, or a goat, that sleep inside with you to protect them from thieves or wolves. Privacy is a foreign concept. If you want a moment alone, you'd better sneak into the woods, and even then, the Lord's forester might fine you for trespassing on his land. Your home is a study in survivalist minimalism. The floor is dirt, hardened by years of footsteps but turning to mud when it rains. Your furniture, if you can call it that, is a rough wooden bench or stool, maybe a wobbly table if you've got carpentry skills. Storage: a few wooden pegs on the wall for your spare tunic and a couple of clay pots for grain or dried peas. Light comes from the fire or, if you're splurging, a tallow candle that smells like burnt fat and spits greasy smoke. Windows are rare. Maybe a small unglazed hole, covered with a wooden shutter or a scrap of cloth to block the worst of the wind. In winter, that wind cuts through the walls like a knife, and you huddle by the fire, praying your fingers don't go numb. In summer, the heat turns your hut into a stifling oven, and the insects are relentless. Flies buzzing around the dung pile outside, moths fluttering toward the fire, and those ever-present fleas hopping from person to person like they're on a world tour. Breakfast is quick and no frills, assuming you have anything to eat. Your diet is a monotonous parade of carbs, dominated by coarse bread made from rye or barley flour. Wheat is a luxury, reserved for the Lord or for selling at market, so your bread is dense, gritty, and sometimes studded with chaff because medieval milling wasn't exactly high-tech. If you're lucky, there's pottage, a watery stew of vegetables like cabbage, leeks, or onions, cooked into a mush that fills your stomach more than it delights your taste buds. Meat? That's for feast days or when a pig decides to die on its own. Your drink is water from the village well, which might be cloudy with sediment or worse, or a weak ale brewed from leftover grain. Ale isn't just for fun. It's safer than water, which could be contaminated with who knows what from upstream. Milk is for kids or making cheese, and forget coffee or tea, those are centuries away. If the harvest was good, you might eat heartily, but a bad year, and there are plenty, means rationing every crumb. In desperate times, serfs have been known to grind acorns, boil grass, or even chew tree bark to stave off hunger. Starvation isn't an abstract concept. It's the neighbor who didn't make it through winter. With your stomach growling, it's time to work. If it's spring, you're in the fields at dawn, gripping a wooden plow heavier than your dreams of a day off. The open field system dominates medieval farming, a patchwork of long, narrow strips radiating from the village like spokes on a wheel. Each strip is yours to work, but not to own. The Lord owns every scrap of land. You plow with a team of oxen if you're lucky enough to share one with neighbors. Otherwise, it's a horse, or worst case, you're yoked to the plow yourself, pulling with all your might while your kids push from behind. The soil is stubborn, full of rocks and clay, and the plow's iron tip, if it has one, dulls quickly. Your hands blister, your back aches, and the sun hasn't even risen yet. But you're not alone. Your neighbors are out there too, cursing the same rocks and swapping gossip about the miller who's been skimming flour. The seasons dictate your life like a tyrannical boss. Spring is for plowing and sowing. Wheat, barley, oats, or rye, depending on the soil and the Lord's demands. You scatter seeds by hand, a skill that takes years to master, because too many or too few means a weak harvest. Summer is for weeding, backbreaking work with a hoe or just your hands, yanking nettles that sting like tiny demons. You're also praying, constantly, for rain, but not too much, and for no locusts, hail, or early frosts. Harvest in autumn is the big show, a frantic race against time to cut the grain with a sickle, tie it into sheaves, and haul it to the barn before rain ruins it. The whole village is in the fields. Men, women, kids, even the village drunk, who's sober for once because he knows hunger doesn't discriminate. Winter is quieter but not restful. You're repairing tools, sharpening blades, mending plow handles, or patching the wobbly cartwheel. Livestock need attention. Your cow or goats, if you have them, are your lifeline for milk, cheese, or a bit of cash if you sell one. And then there's boon work, extra labor you owe the Lord. Maybe you're harvesting his fields, digging ditches for his manor, or hauling firewood to his castle. Refuse? That's a one-way ticket to the Lord's court, where his steward will fine you a chicken, a sack of grain, or anything you can't afford to lose. The Lord is the center of your universe, and not in a warm, fuzzy way. He's the guy who owns the land, the mill, the oven, and pretty much your entire existence. He's not your friend, and he's not stopping by for a chat unless you've done something to tick him off. Forgot to deliver your rent in barley? That's a fine. Killed a deer in the forest to feed your starving kids? That's poaching, and you're in deep trouble. A fine, a beating, or if the Lord's in a bad mood, something worse. The manor court is where disputes are settled, and it's about as fair as a rigged card game. The jury is your fellow serfs, but they're not risking their necks for you when the Lord's steward is glaring at them. Fines are the Lord's favorite tool, payable in grain, livestock, or labor, and they're designed to keep you just poor enough to stay obedient. The Lord's power isn't just economic, it's personal. He can demand you marry someone you barely know to keep the workforce strong, or draft you to fight in a feud with a neighboring baron, handing you a rusty spear and wishing you luck. The church is the other big player in your life, and it's a complicated mix. On one hand, it's your only connection to something bigger than your village. The promise of heaven, the fear of hell, stories of saints that somehow make your suffering feel noble. On the other hand, it's another institution with its hand out. You owe a tithe, 10% of your harvest, to the church whether you're eating or not. They mediator, they'll want a mortuary payment. Your best cow, your only cloak, whatever you've got of value. The local priest is your link to this system, and he's not always the pious type. Some priests are devout, spending their days praying and tending souls, but others are just as likely to be at the tavern, mumbling through a sermon or squeezing you for extra offerings. Still, you go to Mass, confess your sins, real or made up, and hope your prayers for a good harvest don't get lost in cosmic bureaucracy. The church calendar shapes your year. Lent means fasting when you're already hungry, and feast days like Christmas or Michaelmas are rare chances to eat well and maybe get a little drunk on ale. Health is a constant gamble. Medieval medicine is a patchwork of folklore, herbal remedies, and blind optimism. Got a fever? The village-wise woman might brew you a tea of willow bark or chamomile, which might help or just taste awful. Broken bone? They'll splint it and hope for the best, but if it heals wrong, you'll limp for life. Toothache? They rip it out with pliers, or you let an abscess fester until it kills you. Hygiene is a distant dream. Plumbing is centuries away. Your water comes from a well or stream where everyone washes, drinks, and occasionally relieves themselves. Dysentery, smallpox, or tuberculosis could sweep through like wildfire, and there's no doctor, no antibiotics, just a prayer to Saint Roch, patron of plague victims. Childbirth is a battlefield. Many women and babies don't make it. Kids face their own gauntlet. About a third don't survive past age 5, thanks to malnutrition, disease, or accidents like falling into the hearth. Life expectancy hovers around 30 to 35, but if you dodge childhood illnesses and don't cut yourself too badly with a sickle, you might hit 50. Old age isn't common, and when it happens, it's less golden years and more creaky joints and endless chores. Your family is your safety net, but it's a flimsy one. Marriage happens young, 15 to 20 for most, because the sooner you start a family, the sooner you have extra hands for the fields. Love might play a role, but survival comes first. Your wife is your partner in the truest sense. You plow together, eat together, raise kids together, and pray together that the harvest doesn't fail. Women have it especially rough. Besides fieldwork, they're cooking, cleaning, weaving, brewing ale, and raising kids who start working as soon as they can walk. Childbirth is frequent and dangerous, with no painkillers or sterile tools. If you're a man, you're the muscle, handling the heaviest labor and dealing with the Lord's demands. Kids aren't coddled. They're scaring birds off crops at 5, herding geese at 7, wielding a hoe by 10. Your parents, if they're alive, live with you, offering advice, wanted or not, and helping with light tasks like spinning wool or mending knits. Everyone's in it together, because one bad season or illness could bring the whole family down. The village itself is your world, a cluster of 20 to 50 huts surrounded by fields, woods, and maybe a stream. It's a tight-knit community, for better or worse. You know everyone's business. Who's fighting, who's flirting, who hid a stolen loaf. Cooperation is key. You share oxen, lend tools, and help rebuild when someone's roof collapses. But it's not all harmony. Disputes over boundary lines or stray livestock can simmer for years, and the village gossip mill is relentless. Still, you rely on each other. If your cow dies, your neighbor might lend you milk. If their house burns, you're there with a hammer and some straw. The tavern, if your village has one, is the social hub, where you swap stories, settle debts, and drink ale that's more gritty than hoppy. It's not glamorous, but it's where you laugh, argue, and feel human. The risks never stop. Fire is a constant threat. A stray spark can reduce your home to ashes in minutes. Thieves or bandits might raid your village, stealing grain or livestock. War is a wild card, rival lords fighting over land, or worse, foreign armies passing through, don't care about your crops or your life. The weather is your biggest foe. A wet spring drowns your seeds, a dry summer wilts them. Frost in May or hail in August could wipe out a year's work. Pests are relentless. Locusts, mice, even crows that seem to know exactly when you're not looking. Disease can strike without warning, from a fever that takes half the village to a mysterious sweating sickness that kills in days. The Black Death is still a century away, but smaller epidemics are common, and there's no quarantine, just prayers and panic. Yet there's beauty in the struggle. Feast days are your lifeline, rare moments when the village comes alive with music, food, and laughter. At Michaelmas, you might roast a goose and share it with neighbors, fat dripping into the fire as kids chase each other around the square. Christmas brings a break from work, a chance to eat well. Maybe even a spiced loaf if the baker's feeling generous, and sing carols that echo in the frosty air. Weddings are another bright spot, with the whole village turning out to drink, dance, and tease the newlyweds. Even daily life has its rhythms. Shared meals, fireside stories, the satisfaction of a well-plowed field. You find humor where you can. The Lord's steward slipping in the mud, the priest forgetting his lines mid-sermon, or the time your neighbor's pig got drunk on spilled ale and staggered into church. These moments don't erase the hardship, but they make it bearable. Could you live this life? Imagine trading your air-conditioned apartment for a field that fights you every step, your grocery store for a harvest you can't control, your Netflix for an off-key but enthusiastic bard. Your day starts before dawn and ends when you collapse, with no weekends, no sick days, just an endless cycle of work punctuated by the Lord's fines and the church's tithes. You'd need a body forged by labor, hands like leather, and a mind that can laugh at the absurdity of it all. Because if you don't laugh, you cry. You'd have to find joy in small things: a warm fire, a full stomach, a neighbor's joke about the Lord's new hat. The serf's life was a brutal, relentless test of endurance, but it was also a life of community, resilience, and hard-won moments of happiness. If you were dropped into their world, you'd probably last a month before bargaining your soul for a hot shower and a burger. A whole lifetime? That's an achievement that would make you a village legend, whispered about around the fire for generations. Let's dig deeper into the daily grind, because the devil's in the details, and medieval life had plenty of devils. Your work as a serf isn't just farming. It's an all-in commitment to keeping the village alive. Take plowing, for example. It's not a shiny John Deere tractor. It's a wooden contraption, often wheelless, that you drag through soil that's more rock than dirt. If you've got oxen, you're yelling at them to move, hoping they don't decide to nap mid-furrow. No oxen? You're pulling it yourself, your kids pushing from behind, and the whole operation feels like moving a couch up a staircase. Sowing comes next, and it's not as simple as tossing seeds into the ground. You need to know your land, where it's fertile, where it's boggy, where the frost lingers too long. You scatter seeds by hand, a skill passed down from your parents, because if you clump them too tightly, they'll choke each other out, and if you spread them too thin, you'll eat air come winter. Weeding is another beast. You're out there with a hoe, or just your hands, yanking nettles, thistles, and other green intruders that seem to grow faster than your crops. Your hands are raw, your knees ache from crouching, and the sun burns your neck. If you're a woman, you might be juggling this with childcare, carrying a baby on your back while you work. Summer also brings pests, locusts descending like a biblical plague, mice nibbling your grain, or birds treating your fields like an all-you-can-eat buffet. You and the village kids spend hours flapping your arms or banging sticks to scare them off, which is about as fun as it sounds. Harvest is the main event, a high-stakes marathon that makes or breaks your year. You're out there with a sickle, a curved blade sharp enough to cut wheat but dull enough to make your arms scream after a few hours. You slice the stalks low, careful not to waste a single grain, then tie them into sheaves with straw or rope. The whole village is out there, moving in an uneven rhythm, because every day counts. Rain could ruin the crop, mold could set in, or a storm could flatten your fields. Once the grain's cut, you haul it to the barn, yours or the Lord's, using a cart if you've got one, or just your back if you don't. Then comes threshing, beating the grain to separate it from the stalks, usually with a flail that's as likely to whack your shin as the wheat. After that, winnowing, tossing the grain into the air so the wind carries off the chaff, assuming the wind cooperates. It's dusty, exhausting work, and by the end, you're coughing up half the field. Winter is quieter but no less demanding. You're fixing tools, sharpening blades, mending plow handles, or patching the wobbly cartwheel. Livestock need attention. Your cow or goats, if you have them, are your lifeline for milk, cheese, or a bit of cash if you sell one. You're also spinning wool or weaving cloth, because your clothes don't come from a store. They come from your hands or your neighbors. Women are the backbone of this work, turning raw wool into thread, thread into cloth, cloth into tunics or cloaks. It's slow, meticulous, and endless, like knitting a sweater for a family of 6 with a single needle. If the Lord demands boon work, you drop everything to build his bridge, repair his barn, or haul stones for his new manor. No pay, just the privilege of not being fined for slacking. The Lord's presence looms over everything. His manor, maybe a mile from your village, is the closest thing to a skyscraper you'll ever see. Stone walls, a high roof, maybe even a tower if he's feeling flashy. You don't go there unless summoned, and when you do, it's cap in hand, eyes on the ground. The Lord's steward runs the show, a man who's all business and no patience, keeping track of who owes what in a ledger you'll never see. The manor court, meeting every few weeks, is where the Lord's power is most visible. Got a dispute with your neighbor over a stray cow? The court decides. Caught fishing in the Lord's river? The court finds you. Want to marry your sweetheart from another village? The Lord's permission comes with a fee, called a merched, because apparently even love has a tax. The court's decisions are final, and appealing to the king's court is an impossible dream. Too far, too expensive, and you're a serf, not a lawyer. The church is just as inescapable. Your village probably has a small stone church, cold and damp, with a wooden crucifix and maybe a faded painting of a saint on the wall. Sunday Mass is mandatory, not just for your soul but because skipping makes you look like a heretic, and nobody wants the bishop's men snooping around. The priest's sermons are your only news, a mix of scripture, moralizing, and vague warnings about the end times. He's also your record keeper, noting baptisms, marriages, and deaths in a book you can't read. The church's tithe is non-negotiable. 10% of your grain, your vegetables, even your eggs if you've got chickens. If you die, the church claims your best beast or your best possession as a mortuary fee, which feels like being mugged by God. Still, the church offers structure. It tells you why the world is the way it is, sin, mostly, and gives you festivals to break the monotony. Christmas, Easter, or your village's patron saint's day, when you might get a day off to eat, drink, and pretend life isn't a constant uphill slog. Health is a roll of the dice, and the dice are loaded against you. Hygiene is a nightmare by modern standards. You wash when you can, which isn't often, because hauling water is a chore, and soap, made from ashes and fat, is a luxury you can't always afford. Your clothes, tunic, hose, maybe a cloak, are wool or linen, rough and patched, worn for days or weeks before washing. Bathing is a rare event, maybe once a month in a wooden tub or the local stream, and even then, it's a group activity with no privacy. Disease is a constant threat. A cut from a rusty tool could get infected, killing you in days. Fevers, fluxes, and agues, probably malaria or something like it, are common, and the cure is often worse than the disease. Bloodletting, purges, or a poultice of dubious herbs. The village wise woman or midwife is your best bet for treatment, but her knowledge is a mix of practical remedies and superstition. Leeches might help with swelling, but praying to Saint Apollonia for a toothache is as effective as it sounds. Childbirth is especially brutal. Midwives do their best, but with no sterile tools or anesthesia, it's a lottery for mother and baby. Kids are both a blessing and a burden. You need them. More hands mean more work done, but raising them is a gauntlet. They're born at home, on a straw pallet, with no medical backup. Many don't survive childhood, victims of diarrhea, fever, or accidents. Those who do are put to work early. By 3, they're toddling after you, carrying small loads or chasing chickens. By 7, they're in the fields, scaring birds or pulling weeds. By 12, they're doing adult work, and you pray they don't get crushed by a cart or drown in the mill pond. Education doesn't exist unless you count learning to plow or spin wool. The priest might teach a few boys to read Latin for the church, but for most, literacy is as distant as the moon. Your kids are your legacy, your workforce, and your retirement plan, assuming you live long enough to need one. The village is your universe, a small but dense world. The huts, clustered around a central square or the church, are identical to yours. Mud walls, thatch roofs, full of smoke and life. The surrounding landscape, fields, woods, a stream or river, is so familiar you could navigate it blindfolded. You know every resident, the grumpy blacksmith, the widow who makes the best ale, the kid who's always in trouble. Cooperation is essential, but so are rivalries. A dispute over a stray pig or a field boundary can become a lifelong feud. The tavern, if it exists, is where tensions are resolved or created. There, under flickering candlelight, you share a jug of sour ale, tell tales of ghosts or heroes, and, for a moment, forget the weight of the world. The risks never cease. Fire doesn't just threaten your house. A blaze in the village can spread fast, leaving everyone homeless. Bandits are a real danger, especially in times of war or famine, when desperate men roam the roads. War itself is a disaster. Armies, whether the king's or a rival lord's, don't care about your crops or your life. The weather is your greatest enemy. A wet spring drowns your seeds, a dry summer wilts them. Frost in May or hail in August could destroy a year's work. Pests are relentless. Locusts, mice, even crows that seem to know exactly when you're not looking. Disease can strike without warning, from a fever that takes half the village to a mysterious sweating sickness that kills in days. The Black Death is still a century away, but smaller epidemics are common, and there's no quarantine, just prayers and panic. But even in this brutality, there are moments of light. Feast days are like a breath of fresh air in a sealed room. At St. John's Feast, you might join a dance around a bonfire, the whole village singing and laughing under the stars. Christmas brings a rare feast, maybe a roasted pig or a meat pie, and for one day, hunger feels distant. Weddings are an explosion of joy, with flute and drum music, and everyone drinking until the world seems kinder. Stories, told around the fire, are your escape. Tales of knights, dragons, saints defying the devil. Religion, despite its demands, gives you hope. You believe your suffering has a purpose, that heaven awaits those who endure. The community, for all its flaws, is your anchor. Your neighbors aren't just neighbors, they're your extended family, the ones who pick you up when you fall and whom you lift when they need it. Could you survive this life? Trading your Wi-Fi for a plow, your coffee for a bowl of watery pottage, your weekend for another day of endless work. Your boss is a noble who sees you as a cog in his wealth machine, and your HR department is a priest more concerned with your soul than your blisters. Physically, you'd need the stamina of a marathoner and hands that could sand wood. Mentally, you'd need a steel mind to handle the constant threats, weather, disease, hunger, while finding joy in small victories, like a sunny day or a loaf that didn't turn out like a brick. You'd have to laugh at the absurdity, like when your neighbor's pig crashes church or the Lord's steward trips in the mud and pretends it didn't happen. The serf's life was an unrelenting test of endurance, but it was also a life of community, ingenuity, and hard-won happiness stolen from the chaos. If you were dropped into their muddy boots, you'd probably miss your thermostat and grocery store within an hour. Survive a whole lifetime? That would make you a mythic figure, a fireside tale about the serf who beat the world.